Welcome to a journey through history, where we will unravel the truth behind the legends and narratives that have endured over the centuries. Today, we will focus on demystifying the most deeply rooted beliefs about one of humanity's most transcendental events, the discovery of America. Join us as we explore and dismantle the 5 most persistent myths that have shaped our understanding of this historical occurrence. And before we dive into this fascinating journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any details of our future revelations. Let's begin this adventure for the truth. Myth number 5. Columbus discovered America. Often, when we talk about the discovery of America, the image that comes to mind is that of Christopher Columbus landing on the shores of a new world in 1492. However, this narrative omits a crucial detail. America was already inhabited by millions of people before the Spanish caravels touched its shores. Indigenous peoples had been living and developing diverse cultures on the American continent for thousands of years. From advanced civilizations like the Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas, to the countless communities flourishing along rivers, mountains, and plains, America was a mosaic of rich and complex peoples and cultures. Moreover, the Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, had reached what we now know as Canada around the year 1000, nearly 5 centuries before Columbus's expedition. Although their presence in North America did not last long, it is a historical fact that challenges the idea that Columbus was the first European to set foot on the American continent. Therefore, to say that Columbus discovered America overly simplifies a much broader history and disregards the existence of pre-Columbian civilizations. What Columbus really did was open the door to the era of European exploration and the subsequent colonization of the continent, which changed the course of world history in a way that still resonates today. But let's remember, America was not discovered in 1492. It was rather rediscovered by the European world, with all the consequences that entail. Myth number 4. Columbus proved that the earth was round. For a long time, the idea that Christopher Columbus, in his daring venture towards the New World, had to fight against the widespread belief that the earth was flat has been perpetuated. However, this narrative is more of a myth than a historical reality. In fact, the notion that the earth is a sphere dates back to antiquity. As early as the 3rd century BC, the Greek astronomer Eratosthenes had calculated the circumference of the earth with remarkable accuracy. During the Middle Ages, this idea was not lost. In fact, it was common knowledge among scholars. The work of the 13th century philosopher and theologian Thomas Aquinas reflects the understanding of the earth's sphericity, and this view was shared by most of the educated minds of the time. Columbus, far from having to convince his contemporaries of the planet's shape, actually faced skepticism about the viability of his journey due to the underestimation of the Earth's size and the existence of unknown lands between Europe and Asia. The experts of the time, based on the calculations of Eratosthenes and others, believed that the distance by sea was too great for a practical journey eastward. Thus, when Columbus set sail westward and arrived at what we now know as America, he was not challenging the belief in a flat Earth, but rather the understanding of the world's dimensions and the distribution of its lands and seas. The real myth is not the shape of the earth, but the distortion of Columbus's courage as a challenge to a supposed medieval ignorance that in reality did not exist. Myth number 3. Columbus's voyage was exclusively financed by the Catholic monarchs. This belief, rooted in the collective imagination, suggests that the expedition that would change the course of history was made possible solely thanks to the sponsorship of Isabella and Ferdinand. However, the reality is more complex and diverse. It is true that the Catholic monarchs played a crucial role in Columbus's endeavor, but they were not the only ones to open their coffers. The funding of the crossing was a mix of public and private investment. The city of Palos de la Frontera, for example, had a significant participation. As part of a sanction imposed by the Crown Palace, was required to provide 2 of the 3 caravels, the Pinta and the Nina, and to cover part of the costs of the expedition. Furthermore, we cannot forget the Pinzon brothers, experienced sailors from Palos, who not only contributed their nautical knowledge, but also their own financing. Martin Alonso Pinzon, along with his brother Vicente, invested a considerable sum of their personal fortune and became co-participants in the risks and benefits of the adventure. The House of Trade of Seville, although founded later in 1503, became the administrative and logistical epicenter of expeditions to the New World, but even from the first voyage Seville played an important role in the organization, and later in the management of transatlantic journeys. In summary, Columbus's expedition was the result of a collaborative effort where the investment of the Catholic monarchs was indispensable, but not exclusive. The contribution of other investors and the involvement of the maritime community of Palos were equally fundamental to set sail towards the unknown and open a new chapter in the history of humanity. Myth number 2. Columbus reached India. One of the most persistent errors in the history of the discovery of America is the belief that Christopher Columbus, upon landing in the New World, had reached the shores of India. The reality is that Columbus never set foot on Indian soil. Instead, he arrived at the Caribbean islands, a territory completely unknown to Europeans at the time. When Columbus set sail in 1492, his goal was to find a shorter route to Asia by sailing west. The idea was simple: to reach the rich lands of the Indies from where the spices and silks so valued in Europe originated. However, what Columbus found was a continent that stood in his way: America. Upon landing on what he believed to be the Indies, Columbus encountered peoples and cultures that looked nothing like what he knew. Despite the evidence, Columbus died convinced that he had reached the Asian shores. This initial confusion led to the original inhabitants of America being called Indians, a term that endures to this day despite its inaccuracy. The persistence of this myth is a reminder of how historical errors can take root and how first impressions can shape the perception of a fact for centuries. Columbus unknowingly had opened the door to a new world, but it was not the world he expected to find. With this discovery, an era of exploration and conquest began that would change the course of history forever. And so we dismantle myth number 2. Columbus did not reach India, but he left us with a legacy of discovery and misunderstandings that we are still trying to understand and correct. Number 1. The conquest was a peaceful process, and we come to myth number 1. The conquest was a peaceful process. This is perhaps the greatest of the myths surrounding the discovery of America. The reality is that the arrival of Europeans in the New World triggered one of the most tragic and violent transformations in human history. The conquest of America was not a harmonious encounter between cultures, but an invasion that unleashed wars, subjugation, and fierce resistance from the indigenous peoples. The conquerors, armed with advanced military technology and horses which were unknown on the American continent, imposed their dominance through force and coercion. The indigenous peoples, far from welcoming the Europeans, with passive acceptance fought with courage and tenacity to defend their lands and their way of life. Indigenous resistance was a constant from the first battles in the Caribbean to the prolonged wars in the Andes and the fierce opposition in Mesoamerica. Moreover, the conquest brought with it diseases for which the indigenous peoples had no immunity, causing mass mortality that decimated the population. Smallpox, measles, and influenza spread like wildfire, killing millions and facilitating the task of conquest and colonization. The imposition of the encomienda, a system of forced labor, and the reductions which sought to relocate and control the indigenous population profoundly altered the pre-existing social and economic structures. Exploitation and mistreatment were commonplace, and indigenous culture, religion, and languages were systematically repressed. In summary, the conquest of America was a violent and traumatic process that left an indelible mark on the continent. Indigenous resistance and the devastating consequences of colonization bear witness that the history of America did not begin with Columbus's arrival, but was brutally transformed by it. Debunking this notion of pacifism is crucial to understanding the true nature of the conquest and honoring the memory of those who fought and suffered during this dark chapter of our history. We sail together through the turbulent waters of history, demystifying the most deeply rooted beliefs about the discovery of America. From the idea that Columbus was the first European to set foot in the New World to the myth that everyone believed the earth was flat, we have seen how historical evidence invites us to question and understand more deeply the events that have shaped our world. Let us remember that history is a complex construction, full of nuances and perspectives that deserve to be explored with rigor and curiosity. By doing so, we not only honor the past, but also enrich our present with a broader and truer knowledge. Before setting sail for new adventures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this journey through history with other knowledge explorers.